The founder of the Nizari Ismaili sect, also known as the Assassins, was born in Iran and passed away there. His father raised him following the Twelver Shia sect, and at the age of 17, he embraced the Ismaili sect. He worked for a period in the Seljuk court, then began to move between regions of Iran to secretly propagate the Ismaili doctrine. His followers increased until he seized the Alamut Castle and made it the center of his mission. From there, he began to expand his influence in neighboring areas and laid the foundations of what he called Fidawiyya, the doctrine of the devotees, sending his followers to assassinate his opponents in broad daylight to instill fear and terror in the hearts of his enemies. Birth and upbringing. Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ja'far ibn al-Husayn ibn Muhammad al-Sabah al-Hamri was born in 428 AH, 1037 CE, in the city of Qom, which was a central hub for Twelver Shia. Some sources suggest his birth in the town of Masum in the Ray province near Tehran. He belonged to the Hamr tribe, as his father came from Yemen to Kufa, then to Qom, and finally settled with his family in Ray. His father followed the Twelver Shia sect and was keen on educating his son in this doctrine, encouraging him to explore various sciences of his time. At the age of 17, he met an Ismaili missionary, engaged in extensive debates, which led to a decisive turning point in his beliefs, ultimately leading him to embrace the Ismaili doctrine. He had knowledge of mathematics and engineering and was well-versed in various theoretical and practical sciences of his time, which qualified him to join the Seljuk court and work as a bureaucrat and advisor to Sultan Malikshah. In the Seljuk court, there are different accounts regarding his entry into and exit from the Seljuk court, all of which are associated with an alleged relationship between him and the Seljuk vizier, Nizam al-Mulk. Some sources talk about a friendship between Al-Hasan al-Sabah, Nizam al-Mulk, and the poet Omar Khayyam during their childhood. They supposedly studied together in Nishapur and made a pact that if any one of them succeeded, they would help the others. Therefore, when Nizam al-Mulk became a vizier, he brought Al-Hasan al-Sabah to work in the Seljuk court. However, this account is doubted by some researchers because Al-Hasan al-Sabah was born in 428 AH, while Nizam al-Mulk was born in 408 AH, indicating a 20-year age gap, making it unlikely that they were childhood friends. Moreover, historical sources state that al-Sabah received his education in Ray, not Nishapur. The name Assassins was given to them because they used to disappear among the bushes to assassinate their opponents, and it was said that they consumed hashish before the assassinations to prevent any hesitation amidst the influence of this narcotic substance. There are varied accounts regarding why Al-Hasan al-Sabah's sect was named Assassins. On the other hand, some Shia historians claim that Nizam al-Mulk conspired to expel Al-Hasan al-Sabah from the Seljuk court, fearing his competence might undermine his position. According to this narrative, when al-Sabah showed his efficiency, the vizier feared losing his position and the sultan's trust. This narrative explains the motive behind Al-Hasan's escape to Egypt. However, Ibn al-Athir in his book, Al-Kamil fi al-Tariq, denies any conflict between al-Sabah and Nizam al-Mulk during that period, stating that the latter treated him well. Ibn al-Athir attributes al-Sabah's escape to Egypt to the annoyance of the ruler of Ray, due to his activities in propagating Ismaili doctrine and sheltering a group of Fatimids from Egypt. Al-Sabah himself explains his journey to Egypt as a directive from the prominent preacher Abdul Malik bin Attash to attend esoteric science classes in Cairo and to meet the Fatimid Caliph al-Mustansir and declare allegiance directly to him. Death, myths and realities. Some sources claim that Hasan Sabah built palaces and vast gardens within the fortress of Alamut, where he created rivers flowing with wine, milk, and honey. He allegedly brought young and beautiful girls to create a place resembling paradise, as described in the Quran. Among the texts that mention these claims is the writing of the famous traveler Marco Polo. These accounts suggest that the leader of the Ismailis would give hashish and opium to young men to intoxicate them, then transport them to palaces inside the fortress, where they would experience a paradise-like atmosphere. Afterward, he would put them to sleep again and convince them that they had been in the highest paradise. If he desired the assassination of someone, he would assign some of his followers to carry out the act, promising them that after death, they would return to the paradise they experienced. Thus, the assassins would fearlessly execute his orders, believing in the paradise awaiting them after death. However, analyzing the topography of the fortress leads one to classify Marco Polo's writings and those of other historians as myths, according to Egyptian thinker and professor of philosophy of religions, Muhammad Othman al-Khashab. According to the same source, the fortress is located on a rock rising more than 10,000 feet above sea level in the mountains of Persia, with a very cold climate where snow falls for more than 6 months a year. Other historians have mentioned that the inhabitants would isolate animals in the southern regions to protect them from the extreme cold, leading al-Khashab to consider Marco Polo's and other historians' accounts baseless, merely adding to the myths surrounding the Sabah and his group. The Egyptian actor Kareem Abdulaziz plays the lead role in the series The Assassins. The Egyptian actor Kareem Abdulaziz played Hassan Sabah in the series The Assassins, social media. A controversial figure. From the time he seized Alamut Castle until his death, Hassan Sabah remained secluded in the fortress, managing a small breakaway state from Sunni rule, where he enjoyed spiritual, intellectual, and political leadership. He relied on an army of skilled preachers and dedicated fidayeen, self-sacrificing fighters, ready to die at the leader's command. Some historians mention that for 35 years, he only left the castle twice, spending most of his time in thought, contemplation, reading, and writing. He authored many books defending the Ismaili doctrine and refuting opposing views, but these works met the same fate of destruction after the Mongols took over the fortress years after his death. It was the scholar al-Shahrastani, a contemporary of Sabah and a prominent figure in the Ash'ari school of thought, who preserved the essence of his teachings in a work called The Four Chapters, along with snippets of his autobiography. Additionally, some Ismaili books borrowed some of his ideas. He is described as the founder of a deviant bloodthirsty movement, sometimes labeled by others as a group of atheists who did not believe in God, while other sources suggest he founded a revolutionary movement born out of complex and weak circumstances in the Islamic world. In a letter addressed to the king of Khwarazm, he expressed his ideas, beliefs, and responses to all accusations against him, stating that he did not bring a new religion, but adhered to Islam and the message of the Prophet Muhammad. In his letter, he criticized the Abbasids, accusing them of spreading corruption and killing thousands of the Prophet's descendants around the world, forcing them into hiding to save themselves. He condemned some of the Abbasid caliph's actions, such as the whipping of Abu Hanifa al-Kufi, a prominent Islamic scholar, and the crucifixion of Mansur al-Hallaj, who was a role model for people. Regarding the assassinations carried out by some of his followers against senior officials in the state, Sabah justified them as a response to the corruption of the Sultan's employees, the agents of the monarchy, and the masters of transactions in the Khorasan region, who exceeded the limits by committing atrocities against the people, including killing women in front of their husbands, and their oppression of the subjects. While some narratives describe Hassan Sabah as power-hungry, others depict him as ascetic, content with simplicity and austerity, strict in applying the principles of Sharia. He forbade his followers from indulging in wine, music, and other forbidden pleasures. Some sources suggest that he was decisive and strict in managing his group's affairs, prioritizing public interest above all else, and uncompromising in implementing the principles and teachings of his movement. He didn't hesitate to kill his son Hussein when he was involved in the killing of a preacher, and he executed his second son after finding him drinking alcohol. He also expelled one of his preachers from the castle for playing the flute. Death. Hassan Sabbah fell ill with a fatal illness in the spring of 518 AH. Sensing his end, he summoned his deputy in the fortress of Lamasar, Buraz Amidi, a prominent preacher dedicated to spreading the Ismaili call and well-versed in the fundamentals of the doctrine. Sabbah chose him as his successor. On the 6th of Rabi al-Thani of the same year, he passed away. The first assassination. Al-Hasan al-Sabbah placed the Seljuk minister, Nizam al-Mulk, at the top of the assassination list, considering him his primary enemy and the enemy of his movement, as he was one of the fiercest opponents of esoteric doctrines. On the 10th of Ramadan in the year 485 AH/1092 AD, a devotee of the Ismaili esotericism approached Nizam al-Mulk disguised as a poor Sufi dervish, claiming to have grievances. When he got close to him, Nizam al-Mulk was stabbed in the heart, and he fell dead at the age of 77. This marked the first assassination of a prominent figure carried out by this movement, laying the foundation for what Shiite historians call Fida'iya, devotional acts. Following this operation, the movement carried out a series of assassinations targeting prominent figures who opposed its call, including ministers, military leaders, princes, and scholars, aiming to instill fear in the hearts of its enemies. Shortly after Nizam al-Mulk's assassination, Sultan Malik Shah died, leading to internal wars among his sons that weakened the Seljuk central authority. Al-Sabbah seized this opportunity to expand his influence and spread his call openly throughout Iran, thanks to the tolerance of Barkiyarak, one of Sultan Malik Shah's sons who cooperated with the assassins to eliminate his opponents in exchange for granting Al-Sabbah the freedom to spread his call. Al-Sabbah managed to gain more followers, and his group's strength increased, expanding its influence and seizing many fortresses, forming a fragmented state known as the Ismaili state. Feeling threatened by the growing influence of Al-Sabbah's group and the increasing descent towards his leniency, Barkiyarak made an agreement with the rulers of Iranian states to eradicate the Ismailis and kill their adherents throughout Iran. Despite suffering a major setback, their main stronghold in Alamut Fortress remained safe from any threat. The Assassins series. This setback did not stop Al-Sabbah, who continued to send preachers and devotees to various regions of Iran and Syria to assassinate those openly opposing his call. Some of the notable figures assassinated during this period include Abu al-Muhassin Abdul Jalil ibn Muhammad al-Dahistani, the vizier of Sultan Barkiyarak, the governor of Baihaq, the mufti of Isfahan, the leader of the Karamita sect in Nishapur, and the Samirami vizier of Sultan Mahmud. Al-Sabbah also ordered sabotage operations to terrorize his opponents, such as the burning of the famous Isfahan Mosque, which was a center for Sunni influence. Attempts to besiege Alamut Fortress, where Al-Hasan al-Sabbah took refuge for decades, were continuous. It was besieged by Sultan Malik Shah, his son Barkiyarak, followed by Sultan Muhammad, who besieged it for 8 years. Later, Sultan Sanjar attempted to continue his brother's policy to eliminate Al-Sabbah, but he faced a direct threat of assassination, leading him to end the siege. In Egypt, when Al-Sabbah left the city of Ray in the year 467 AH/1076 AD, he did not go directly to Egypt, but headed towards Isfahan, where he spent a period advocating for the Ismaili Fatimid doctrine. Then he proceeded to Azerbaijan, then to Miafarkan, then to Mosul, then to Sinjar, Rabba, Damascus, Sidon, Tyre, and Akka, before finally taking the sea route to the shores of Egypt. He arrived in Cairo in the year 471 AH/1078 AD, where he was warmly received by the Fatimid Caliph Al-Mustansir, as well as senior preachers and state officials. During his meeting with the Caliph, Al-Sabah asked him, "Who will be my imam after you?" To which he replied, "My son, Nizar." In Egypt, he clashed with the emir of its armies and the minister of the sword and the pen, Badr al-Jamali, who opposed Nizar's succession to the caliphate after Al-Mustansir and supported his younger brother, Ahmed al-Mustali. Moreover, Jamali was displeased with Al-Mustansir's esteem for Al-Hasan, so he worked to expel Al-Sabah from Egypt after he spent 3 years there, although some historians say he spent about 18 months there. Taking refuge in Alamut, Al-Sabah left Egypt and sailed to Acre, then to Aleppo, then to Baghdad, and from there to Persia. He reached Isfahan in June 1081 AD/473 AH and spent 9 years moving secretly from one city to another, advocating for the Ismaili doctrine and gaining followers. During this period, his followers in Isfahan killed a muezzin who had invited him to their doctrine, but he refused to respond, fearing they might expose him to the authorities. This was the first assassination carried out by his followers. When the Seljuk minister, Nizam al-Mulk, heard of the incident, he ordered the arrest of the killer, realizing the danger posed by this group and the threat it posed to the authorities' security and stability. He began to track down its members and preachers, prompting Al-Sabah to seriously consider finding a formidable fortress to protect himself and his followers from continuous pursuit and enable him to spread his call. Al-Sabah chose the fortress of Alamut for this purpose. It was a fortress built by one of the Dalamite kings, situated on a high rock amidst the mountains, about 100 kilometers from Tehran. The seizure of Alamut Fortress by Al-Sabah's group marked the first major historical action carried out by this nascent movement. From Alamut Fortress, Al-Sabah continued to spread his call in the neighboring areas, seizing a number of fortresses and strongholds using both ideological persuasion and military force. His expansionist ambitions angered Sultan Malik Shah, the Seljuk ruler, who decided to launch 2 military campaigns against Alamut Fortress and Kohistan to eliminate the growing influence of Al-Sabah, but both failed to achieve their objectives.